But now I'd like to pass the torch back to Jane Turner for the reason why we're here today, celebrate whistleblowers and hear their stories. So Jane Turner, take it away for Life After Whistleblowing.
Thank you, Sherry. And we have today some of those legacy whistleblowers. Very, very impressive. I'm going to give you a short intro because I think everybody probably knows them. We have Jackie Garrick, who's the former director to the U.S. Department of Defense, Suicide Prevention Office for Veterans. And all of these whistleblowers suffered severe retaliation. Jackie established the Whistleblowers of America. And then we have Sara Thompson, who filed in 2017 a whistleblower complaint against the Peace Corps. She has been working actively with Congress. Then we have Fred Whitehurst. Everyone knows Fred Whitehurst. He is the supervisory special agent who was in the FBI lab, blew the whistle on terrible negligence that was happening there. He established the Forensic Justice Project of America. And then Sherron Watkins, who needs no introduction. Everyone knows Sherron. She's the Enron whistleblower who exposed corporate misconduct, and she provided all the material necessary for enactment of corporate reform law. So what all these whistleblowers we're going to talk to today have in common is that they not only have survived, but they have thrived. And all of these whistleblowers came under extreme retaliation. So they are survivors. And we're going to talk to each one of them today. If you have any comments, put them in the chat or questions. And we're going to start out with Jackie Garrick, founder of the Whistleblowers of America. Hello, Jackie.
Hello, Jane. How are you?
Good, thank you. Delighted to have you on today.
I'm glad to be here today. I also want to convey to Steve, as you're talking about these National Whistleblower Day proclamations, we had gotten Escambia County, the home of Whistleblowers of America. Our county did us a proclamation recognizing National Whistleblower Day as July 30th. So woohoo.
No, that's excellent, Jackie. I was going to point that out because from that start, we're hoping to initiate this year across America. So kudos to you and keep up the good work. Go ahead, Jackie.
Yeah, okay, you were just on mute. So by background, I am a Army social work officer. I spent almost 40 years now working with the military, as hard as that is to believe. And I was the deputy director for the American Legion. I worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs. I was working for the Congress when I was asked to come over to the Defense Department. And so I came to the Defense Department to do wounded warrior programs and suicide prevention. And it was while I was doing the suicide prevention office that I felt that there were these conflicts of interest over the contracts. And I made my disclosure. And sure enough, shortly after that, I got removed from my position. I wasn't qualified for the job that I had created. And the intimidation, the retaliation, all those things continued. And to make a long story short, in 2020, the MSPB judge and AJ ruled in my favor. And he recognized that what I had experienced at the Defense Department was in fact retaliation, that this hostile work environment and the animus that I experienced caused PTSD. It was traumatizing, and they issued me all my back pay and a disability retirement. I took that money and I invested in building out Whistleblowers of America, which is a peer support program. We are all volunteers, it's all peer-to-peer, and we are very trauma-informed in our perspective, and our goal really is to end suicide among employees. Suicide is the 4th leading cause of death among working-aged adults. So we must consider those economic factors when we're thinking about the whistleblowers, people who are being discriminated against, harassed at work, that there are mental health implications to that, and that people who are traumatized are more susceptible to PTSD, depression, suicide, but also to stress-related conditions and disorders like autoimmune disease and musculoskeletal migraine headaches. All of these things trickle down from being a whistleblower. And so what we're trying to do is create a whistleblower protection advocacy program so that we can train and educate people who want to be advocates, but we know that hurt people hurt people. So we want to make sure that the people who are going to be providing this advocacy have been able to do a little bit of their own healing, and that they've connected with their own therapy, that their case, even if it's still ongoing, they're in a healthy place with it. So we've created the Workplace Promise Institute, which will be September 7 through 9 in Pensacola Beach, Florida. We picked a beautiful place, not only because that's now the home of Whistleblowers of America, but because it's a wonderful opportunity for health, restoration, to build your resilience and just feel renewed in these battles. And so that's why we started our advocacy program, our training and education program, and we hope that more people will take advantage and join us.
Jackie, you are an inspiration. I'll have to tell you that. I am so impressed with you. This panel, you know, is life after whistleblowing. Did you suffer through PTSD?
I still do.
Okay, you have it. And do you find that most whistleblowers, if not 100%, have it?
I think so. I think that what we don't understand about the trauma of the emotional abuse, the bullying, now, not to say that there aren't whistleblowers who are physically shot at, assaulted, have their homes broken into, and there is that physicality of the trauma. But the bullying, the identity disruption, the ethical dissonance, the moral injury, all of those things that shatter your worldviews and change your perspective on society, on your life, on the way you live your life, you know, things you thought you were well invested in, like your career and your family and your profession, that all gets taken away. And that is very traumatizing. I mean, I lost my home. I had to sell my house while all this was going on. It's extremely disruptive. And, you know, anytime I see the military suicide numbers, I get triggered. I know I need to take a breath because it makes me mad. I get angry. I start to have all those flashbacks and those feelings that something could have been done about this. And now we're witnessing this horror. And I feel helpless and guilty that I can't do more to be helpful, that I've been sidelined from my profession that I had so cared about. I was talking to somebody the other day and I called it my real life, that this is what I did in my real life, as if there was this demarcation in who I am in the world. And it has, it's changed.
Exactly. I think of the 10 years I spent on, I call it out in the wilderness, because I was so fractured from my identity as being an FBI agent. Once they took that away, it took me 10 years to recover from the damage. It's different for different people, isn't it?
I think so. I mean, I feel like I've stumbled into what I'm doing. I'm, you know, I don't profess to be the only expert in this field, but I felt like when I started to look at the trauma, I mean, there are plenty of legal experts, right? I mean, we have some wonderful lawyers and that know how to represent clients, but very few clinicians that understand this as a traumatic stressor. And so that's really what I wanted to get behind, is understanding the nature of the trauma and how to help people heal.
And how long is it, Jackie, since you've had your experience of whistleblowing?
This all began for me in 2014, and then it took until 2020 when my case was resolved. And then, of course, we started Whistleblowers of America in 2017. And that's where I feel like the power of the peer connection is probably the most healing thing I do. It's when I feel like I can help somebody else or coach somebody else, or, you know, when we started, when we started Whistleblowers of America, it was because I had talked to another law enforcement officer, not FBI, who professed that she had a gun and that she had thoughts of killing herself, and that she had the gun out on the table. She was going to put it away, and we made plans to talk again. And I began to see where the combat veterans that I had dealt with, doing battle for your life, professionally gang raped, in a fight, that these were some of the same things that combat veterans were saying, that whistleblowers were saying. So I saw that connection, and I thought, we need to bring this trauma-informed perspective that we use with combat veterans and the peer support we use with combat vets, because vet to vet, cop to cop, we know those things work. And we need to find new ways to heal, because whistleblowers need to know that there's a life after whistleblowing, that they feel they can vent, they can be validated, and how to, you know, where's the gas, where's the brake, you know, when do you drive hard and keep up the good fight, and when is the time to kind of pull back and let other things in your life in, like going to the beach in Pensacola and coming to a conference, and we're going to do yoga and drum circles, because we need all those things to heal.
Exactly. And, you know, it's interesting, we do have legacy whistleblowers here, but the same time you founded the Whistleblowers of America, Sara Thompson filed her whistleblower suit against the Peace Corps. And so, Sara, you are kind of a whistleblower who's not yet legacy, but you have some important things to share. Go ahead, Sara, tell us.
Thanks, Jane. And, you know, I'd like to say that I'm kind of an honorary member of, you know, junior honorary member whistleblower, because to be honest, I've never held Peace Corps accountable. You know, I filed the whistleblower complaint, but the OSC denied my complaint. They said that as a Peace Corps volunteer, I am not a federal employee and so cannot access Office of Special Counsel. So I like to say, as you know, I mentioned I'm an honorary whistleblower. I'm not officially a whistleblower, even though I've tried very hard to get the hat. But really, for me, you know, whistleblowing was a technique of last resort. Before blowing the whistle, I had contacted both federal agencies, the Peace Corps and the Department of Labor, and highlighted how they were not compliant with their own rules and regulations. I had contacted the Office of Inspector General of both agencies. I had filed a lawsuit against Peace Corps. I sued Peace Corps due to their use of an anti-malarial medication that was the least effective, most toxic drug. That lawsuit was denied. The court said we don't have jurisdiction over issues that arise overseas. And so, you know, I've never been able to hold Peace Corps accountable. I talked to reporters. I had multiple conversations with staffers on the Hill, and nothing has really been done up until, you know, just recently, which I'll get to. But really, you know, despite all of these attempts, Peace Corps is still endangering the lives of Peace Corps volunteers, especially because they operate with impunity, because Peace Corps volunteers cannot hold them accountable for the dangers and risk that Peace Corps puts volunteers into, or situations that Peace Corps puts volunteers into. And so, you know, I've tried to use my experience as an example to highlight how Peace Corps volunteers are not empowered. We're not able to hold Peace Corps accountable. And so, you know, as we talked about, you know, whistleblowing exposes gaps in capabilities and procedures, protocols, and systems. And really, if whistleblowers do not say anything, then they become part of the problem. And so one of the things that I had wanted to do was to become part of the solution. You know, I wanted to solve the problems that Peace Corps volunteers were encountering. And so it's really difficult, though. You know, as Jackie had indicated, the life of a whistleblower is frustrating. The life of a whistleblower is is just incredibly discouraging on many days, and it's incredibly frustrating. And so despite the fact that I've chosen to live with integrity, despite the fact that I've chosen to listen to my conscience, and I want to stand up with dignity and self-respect, I really grapple with that decision of how much more am I going to move forward in these advocacy efforts. I am not a trained advocate. I don't have an organization behind me. I have no fancy email address. I have no, bling bling or cash to lure Congress to do the right thing. So I'm oftentimes ignored. I'm dismissed. I'm belittled even by staffers on the Hill. Oftentimes I'm chastised for sending an email or saying something critical. And that sort of hostile environment of working with Congress to try to push for reform has been incredibly difficult. And especially related to this Peace Corps Reauthorization Act. I fully support the whistleblower provision that is in the Peace Corps Reauthorization Act. I've worked very, very, very hard to push for that provision and to ensure that it remains a provision that has some teeth to it, that can hold, so that Peace Corps volunteers can hold Peace Corps accountable. But it's very frustrating because Congress is forcing me to choose about who I'm supporting. Right now, there's another provision in the bill for an increase in disability pay for returned volunteers who are disabled. So currently, returned volunteers who are disabled make $20,000 a year, and that's it. That $20,000 has to cover your shelter, your living expenses, your doctor's appointments, and everything. And that's a poverty level. That disabled veterans actually can make twice that amount. Usually disabled veterans, if you're 100% disabled, you make $40,000 a year. And that's twice the amount that disabled Peace Corps volunteers receive. And Republicans in Congress, especially Republicans in the Senate, Senator Risch, has single-handedly decreased the amount in disability pay that we want to pay disabled volunteers. On the House side, we have Representative Virginia Fox, who has indicated that she wants to single-handedly remove just any increase whatsoever in disability pay for returned volunteers. And it's appalling. This sort of environment where you have congressional members who are making millions of dollars a year and do not support the volunteer, do not support individuals who go overseas to, talk about how great America is, to learn from other cultures and learn what's so great about other cultures and have a very, proactive cultural exchange. Republicans in Congress don't support that. Republicans in Congress would prefer volunteers to come back, live in shelters, live homeless on the streets, or live back in their developing countries that they served in, because it's too expensive to live here in the States on the disability pay that volunteers make. So, Congress has put me in a really difficult position of, do I support this legislation or not? It's like, obviously I support parts of this legislation, but I really, really, really support the volunteer. I'm here to support disabled volunteers. I'm here to support sick volunteers. I'm here to support injured volunteers. And as Jackie indicated, that can be exhausting. It's my well of resilience is kind of running up dry lately, especially operating in this environment with Congress. And so really for me, there has, the whistleblowing experience has had negative aspects to it. I really don't want to sugarcoat it for anybody by saying, oh, whistleblowing's great. It's really not. It just leads to greater frustration, and it leads to more moments where I just want to pull out my hair than not. And so, I've grappled with this, the talking points that I wanted to highlight for this panel, because I didn't want to sound so negative. But really, the reality of the situation is that as a whistleblower, you're going to be frustrated, you're going to be belittled, you're going to be dismissed, you're going to be gaslit, you're not going to be heard in many cases. And people might even go out of their way to attack you. I had a few volunteers who attacked me and said that I'm just trying to make money from Peace Corps, or, I should have known that serving in a developing country would have been dangerous. Yeah, but Peace Corps specifically endangered me. Peace Corps specifically
Yes.
made me sick. And so it's really important to hold federal agencies accountable. And it's really important for Congress to do their job and help the general public with holding federal agencies accountable. And it's really important for Congress to represent the people. We elect you, we give you a job, and you need to be responsive to what we're saying. And currently, Republicans in Congress are not. So maybe I shouldn't be, I don't know how long I've been speaking. So you can interrupt me.
No, Sarah, you're wonderful. Did you say you didn't think you were a whistleblower? Did you say that?
Officially, I'm not.
Oh, no, officially you are, my friend. Officially you are.
I really
And-
appreciate it.
Yeah, no, officially, Sara Thompson, you are a whistleblower. And as I like to say, a puppy puncher, as you know, when you take on a favored organization, you're seen as somebody who would punch a puppy. But
Peace
you
Corps is
are.
such a cute puppy. I
Yes.
mean, it's such great US PR. I
Right.
fully support that. I
And
just
you
want
punched
volunteers
it.
to be
Yes.
supported. Yeah, I did.
You punched it. But
Yeah.
this is why it's important to have you on the panel, because Jackie and Fred and Sherron have been on the same journey you're on. And so they've been there, they've done it, and that's what they accomplish. And I expect you are going to be an incredibly important part of the whistleblowing community. Jackie, did you have your hand up?
No, mm-mm.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm
So-
listening.
Oh, yeah, bless your heart. Interesting, isn't it? So, Fred, you have here again, legacy whistleblower. You've established a foundation like the others. And so tell us your story, and let's give Sarah some hope. Fred, you have to unmute, sweetie. Fred, you
Fred, are
got
you
on?
there?
Yeah, I think Fred's having a hard time. Technology prevents him. So
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah, there
yes.
you are.
Fred
Let me
Whitehurst.
say it again. When you and I joined the FBI, we got a badge. So we need to make Sara Thompson a whistleblower badge.
Okay,
Okay? And send it to her.
I want one too.
okay.
I understand from you, Jane, that you want me to talk about life after whistleblowing. Well, life after whistleblowing immediately is hell. You blow the whistle and then all hell busts loose. And it takes your breath away. I found myself very quickly walking down Florida Avenue with a guy named Stephen Cohn, who you've seen here today already. And the first thing he suggests is we're going to sue the president of the United States. Jane, I just wanted to fix some problems in the lab. But I made the mistake of telling Stephen Cohn and Mike Cohn and David Colapento, I don't care what it takes. If I die, this has to stop. This has to stop, because it was human rights violations. It was terrible what was going on. So then he didn't decide, he already knew. See, Steve was the hell that busted loose. It wasn't what they did to me immediately. They came in. We're going to sue the Attorney General and the FBI Director and the FBI and the US government, US Department of Justice. And each time he named another defendant in this lawsuit, he didn't realize, because he's a madman, he walks so fast as he's talking. I actually sat on the curb because I got nauseated. I mean, the spoken word does not nauseate me. It scared the tar out of me, okay? But then it happened. And a guy who drives a pickup truck with crank-up windows in it became all over the news, and my goodness. And, go to the YouTube and you can see things about me that never were true and never will be true. But, that's not me. And then it went away. Well, I got another life. I moved out of DC with a Whitehurst deal. They paid me my paycheck for another 7 years, and they gave me my retirement check until I die. And that depends on how mad they are at me. Okay. But I came down to a little town in North Carolina to take care of my folks. And when we got here, my daughter wanted to know why we had moved out of Washington, D.C. And I said, because, sweetheart, people wanted to steal me from you and mom. And I didn't let them. You know, if you want to talk to me, you know, you got a long drive from Washington, D.C. But I could see where it was going. I didn't want to run for Congress. Somebody suggested that. What I said was not a political statement. It was a statement about truths that were not finding their way to courtrooms in our country. But okay, so life went on. And it does go on if we let it go on. Now, when I was blowing the whistle, I realized that you can't sue your boss and win or lose and keep your job. It's just not going to happen. I think Sherron can probably tell us that's the truth, okay? You can, and so can Jackie. So you've got to do something afterwards. You've got to find something to do. Well, one of the things I did was I attended law school at night. Now, I didn't want to be a lawyer, and I don't want to be a lawyer now. I'm the worst lawyer in my county. But that's what I do for a living, that, and I'm a forensic consultant. But I went to law school at night, and that essentially re-engineered me. But, you know, Jane, in life, I never intended to be a law enforcement officer either. I'm a professional scientist. And what attracted me to the FBI lab was all the toys and all the neat projects to work on. And being a law enforcement officer, in fact, when I joined the FBI, I was very specific. I don't want to carry a gun. I don't want to go to the field. But I fell to the suggestions of the recruiter. And as he said, if you're not a law enforcement officer in the FBI, you're a second-class citizen. You can't do anything. Okay, well, I went to the field for 4 years. And that's where I first started. I and other folks started raising issues. And everything from voucher fraud to time and attendance sheets to lying to Congress about we were working counterintelligence issues when there weren't any spies anywhere for miles around. Those sort of things bothered us. When I finally went to DC in '86, I just decided the next lie that somebody puts before me, I'm going to do something about. This is it. Been 4 years in the field, a lot of good, hardworking people out there, but there's some crooks in the FBI, and I'm going to do something about it. And I got signed to a crook as my training agent. And you've seen the movie Training Day. Well, that's essentially, I was trained within 90 days of getting to the lab that we all commit perjury before we embarrass the FBI in a court of law. Well, so after all that sort of began to come out in 1992, I left the Bureau in '98. You know, there was, as Sara describes, as Jackie describes, all of the, oh my gosh, you can't be saying this, it's going to sink the canoe in the middle of the river. Well, guess what? It didn't. I've been watching them now since '82. That's 40 years. And I'm not in the Bureau now, but I watched them from the outside. And sadly, Jane, the FBI laboratory management has allowed the same human rights violations to creep back into their work product, altering scientists' reports, scientific reports, testifying in courts beyond the expertise, whatever. And that's been a little bitter pill, because you know the Bureau, and I know the Bureau. It was our family. And what we did, the time, the effort, the oh my gosh, they're back to it. One thing that's satisfying to me is the whole nation is watching it now, as the FBI gets in bed with whoever's going to give it the biggest paycheck. And it's sad, but okay. Well, I think though, after whistleblowing, if you allow it, if it doesn't become the driving force in your life, peace can come back. If you allow peace back into your life. My life revolves around a very shoddy law practice and forensic consulting and my tractor and, you know, a little home up against the woods in this little town of 1,500 people and my church and, you know, kind of Mayberry. And I still watch the Bureau. I still am active in assisting whistleblowers when they come to me. I hadn't heard Jackie speak before, but it's particularly, what's the word? Up on post-war trauma and the military's horrible treatment of coming home soldiers, you know. By the way, Jackie, we'll be talking about that in the future. I'm sorry that I hadn't jumped into your area already. But the other side of it is we have support groups. We do. We're not alone. And we carry our support groups through that combat. In my case, my extended family, my immediate family, they go through that combat. And being fully aware, watching them. You know, I remember one time I stayed in Vietnam for over 3 years. And one time I came home and my dad said, Fred, you need to stop this. Now he was a military, you know, he was in the military, retired military, but he said, you need to stop this. You're terrifying your mother. Well, what he was trying to say is, Fred, I'm terrified. But of course, you know, it's the same thing. Our families, this had a horrible effect on my daughter, a horrible effect. You know, she knows and will the rest of her life that the FBI are the bad guys. Well, they're not, but she lived through that. So life after whistleblowing, bring some peace back into your life. Seriously, let it back in. Don't let them take that from you. Continue to ride that horse. You know, take that lasso out and bring down those steers, but put some peace back in your life. Watch rocks grow, if nothing else. You know, just get yourself a favorite rock and watch that rock grow. Okay? Right out the window of my office here, I've got one of 5 community gardens that I keep. This morning I was on the tractor. I had to go and take a shower to show up for this thing. Okay? But again, if I'd leave you with that, you know, it's an analogy, but would you go outside your house and pick up a rock? And if you're really upset, sit there and watch that rock grow. Okay, if nothing else. Fine.
That would be like playing golf.
Say what?
I said that would be like playing golf. Just chase the rock with a stick.
No. You know, I'm a real man. I don't play golf. I know you don't want to hear that, Jane. So I will shut up now.
Okay. Very few people know that you're a war hero. I know you don't like to talk about it, Fred, but I'm going to throw it out there. So there. And you did an excellent job. You've written a book. You certainly have had a very successful life, and you have dealt with so many whistleblowers. I know you saved me when I started my journey. I sat outside, I'll never forget it, outside of Victoria's school, elementary school, and just poured my heart out to you, trying to understand why it was happening. And you really saved my life. And so you're more of a hero than just being a war hero, Fred. You're pretty special. Okay, now I'll move on, Fred, before you make a joke, because you are special. Now we're going to move on. All you have to do is say Enron whistleblower, and everyone knows that's Sherron Watkins. She's been on the cover of Newsweek. She is known around the world, and her life after whistleblowing has been highly successful. Sherron, tell us, how did that happen?
Well, in summary, Jane, it probably happened because Enron imploded in a wave of accounting scandals, you know, part of my warning to the CEO. So the manipulator of truth, the abuser of power, Enron, collapsed into financial ruin at the end of 2001. So, you know, in all the other cases, the FBI, obviously still a strong institution, our military, a strong institution, the Peace Corps still operating. For most whistleblowers, they don't have a life story like mine, where the person, the organization they were reporting on implodes. Now I still have enemies and naysayers, but I think I have benefited from the fact that there was a wave of corporate scandals. Enron was followed by WorldCom, some problems at Tyco, Health South, Adelphia, just a whole collapse. And really the media, put me, Cynthia Cooper from WorldCom, and then Colleen Raleigh from the FBI on a pedestal. Time put us up there as persons of the year in 2002. So it made for a good story arc. Here are the bad guys, here are the good guys. But in the long run, whistleblowing usually does destroy lives, as Jackie mentioned. Things that you thought were your identity, your career, your friendships, your work colleagues are gone. And I do think things like Whistleblowers of America, her organization, is helpful, because all of the whistleblowers I've met speaking across the globe, after a leadership conference or an accounting conference, people come up to speak to me to tell me their personal whistleblower story. And usually their lives have been wrecked because the organization they're reporting on is still in power and has squashed them like a bug. And it's been hard on them. Life after whistleblowing, I think Fred just mentioned it. You've got to find a way where you pivot and you look for a different life and a different way of finding fulfillment and satisfaction. You've got to look after yourself as well. And where I see the most tragedy is where whistleblowers have kind of gotten married to the idea that it's their purpose in life to fix the malfeasance, and they don't have the power to do that. And I appreciate things like Dodd-Frank, that with award programs for whistleblowers, it has attracted legal talent to the cause of the whistleblower. And I think, like Jackie's organization, is needed to come alongside lawyers, because lawyers are having to be mental health counselors, because whistleblowers do need other people to speak to and talk to that have walked their path. There's so much comfort in just being able to talk to someone that understands what you're going through. But Jane, you said it right. I am probably the only whistleblower that has a very good story. For 20 years, I have been going around the globe speaking about Enron, the leadership failures there, whistleblowing, whistleblower laws, and it's a different lifestyle, but I still relate to whistleblowers that have a story that is more tragic, just because I relate to the fact of lost friendships, weirdness, inability to join church committees, just things that are different now than they were the first 20 years of my adult life.
And Sherron, have you had, since you left, you never got back into the accounting or financial world, have you?
No, but I did try to get into some aspects of consulting boards. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act was passed in the summer of 2002 as a corporate regulation act to address the collapses that had happened. And it did provide anti-retaliation provisions. So companies, supposedly were not going to be able to retaliate against whistleblowers. It had its own issues where it wasn't quite as effective as Congress wanted it to be. But that act said that boards of directors, need to do their job. Don't be asleep at the switch. Trust but verify. Really, you're the last line of defense against management of the company running that company into the ground for the shareholders who own the company. And I thought I was getting pretty far along with certain groups, certain companies, and then mysteriously some door would shut.
Yeah.
So it really just takes one person in an organization to raise some doubts. There's some noise about her. Some people question her motives. Can't we get this skill set elsewhere? So over time, after enough doors get shut, you realize that you're never going to have a corporate career. You've got to look for fulfillment and satisfaction elsewhere.
So Sherron, if you don't mind me asking, how do you make a living?
Well, it's a little scraw and scratch. The problem with speaking events is that you really don't know when they're going to happen. And I have learned to, worry less and just trust that things will come together. My spiritual life has been greatly changed because of this. I do think that when you take a risk with the talents you've been given, when you take a risk with the skills you have, for others, for that nameless, faceless shareholder that doesn't realize financial statements might be manipulated. In Sarah's case with the Peace Corps, there are volunteers, good-hearted volunteers every year going to a developed country, no idea that something bad could happen to them, and the Peace Corps just kind of goes, you should have known better. So she is, fighting for more accountability there. And I now kind of lost my train of thought.
Yeah, it's making a living. I know during
making a living.
COVID.
Yeah,
I know during COVID it was very tough.
Well, it's more that I've got to trust that my life may look very different monetarily wise, but in so many other ways. My daughter was 2 years old when I reported accounting fraud to the CEO of Enron. And when Enron collapsed, I'm on the speaking circuit. Well, that means flying out the night before, speaking and coming home. So she kind of got the benefit of a stay-at-home mom, where I was at all of her sporting events and plays and picking her up from school, dropping her off. I was able to be much more present, for her than if I'd been on that corporate grindstone where, before Enron collapsed, the nanny was coming to the house. She's not with me all during the daytime work hours. I'm back home at 6 or 6:30. You really don't have a lot of time in your children's lives. And, if you want to spend time with your children, the trick is you got to do it when they're children.
Yes, blow the whistle. That'll do it. Yeah, you'll be at home. Yes. What advice would you give to somebody like Sara who is finding out all this negativity that accompanies being a whistleblower, and she's kind of trying to figure out where she goes next? Her and Stephen went up to the Hill, Stephen Cohn, and pushed for this legislation, pushed for different things up there, hard going. But it's so discouraging. What advice would you give somebody like that?
Well, as Sara was telling her story, my thought was, she's going to have to keep rowing the boat a little bit, but, take the time out to go to a bank, enjoy the sun, have a picnic in a pasture, then get back in the boat and row it again. Because eventually the sad thing is there's going to be another person like Sara that is mistreated by the Peace Corps. It's going to be problematic. And then Congress will be like, wow, we've been told year after year, we need to pass these acts, that we need to protect these volunteers. We've been ignoring Sara and the people in her boat rowing slowly in one direction. And there's going to be egg on their face, and they finally will do something. It will just switch like that. But the issue is, it is a little bit on her back to keep rowing that boat. So she's got to find the Pensacola beaches that she will sometimes enjoy. There's got to be some focus on her own, finding that rock to watch grow.
Well, and I should have mentioned, I'm also a doctorate student now, so I'm not sure. I feel like maybe I'm a bit of a masochist, maybe in certain ways.
Yes, you are.
So there's that as well. So maybe, I'm wearing too many frustrating hats.
Yeah, it's amazing what you've accomplished, Sara. We have to mention that. It's absolutely amazing what you've accomplished. And Fred, what advice would you give to Sara?
Go get yourself a rock.
I like that. And Jackie?
Well, my advice to Sarah was, let's go have a beer. So,
Yes,
and
good advice.
just
You
to,
know, Jane, I think it's important that we realize we're not the wall, we're a brick in the wall.
Mhm.
And that
Yes,
Sherron, when she was talking, or, you know, that's something I've said so often. If I'm the wall, when I make a mistake, the wall crumbles. I know you may not be hearing me, my internet connection's unstable, but we are simply one brick in a wall.
Mhm.
We shouldn't take that whole wall on ourselves. And what Sherron was saying to Sarah is exactly that. You've laid the groundwork, you built the Appian Way, someone else is going to take it to Rome. Am I making sense to you, Sarah? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
As a result of my revelations about the FBI crime lab, it was part of a brick, okay, that we realize in our country, forensic science is in a mess. I mean, they're essentially a human rights violation that we've sanctioned, if you will, said, go ahead and do what you're going to do. And one lab after another, it's getting to be a monthly scandal about labs. The FBI was the pinnacle of forensic science labs. And we're hoping again, by the way, because I am a federal contractor, I do federal criminal defense consulting, we're going to blow the whistle on it again.
Yeah.
3 years later, but it's again, you're just one book in a library.
Mhm.
Well, and I should
Excellent.
say, I am surrounded by a little small misfit group of Peace Corps volunteers. So I certainly have a few friends that I constantly tap into, and I really benefited from some of the groundwork that previous volunteers have laid for me. So I would be remiss to say that, you know, all of these strides have been made just because of my hard work. There have been Peace Corps volunteers before me who have really helped to lay the groundwork that I benefited from. And I appreciate the note that, you know, I'm potentially laying the groundwork for future volunteers. So.
Yeah, that's a very good point. We do have questions from the audience. One asks, how do you bring peace back when you have no job or income?
So I'm going to guess that question is for me. So I think that is part of the struggle. I mean, that's part of what therapy is all about. And there sometimes is what I like to call the reset. You know, I was talking to a whistleblower just the other day who was in the same situation, had no job, was running out of the money that they had saved. And we just talked about, like, so what are the other things in your life you like to do? You know, might you want to go back to school? Might you want to get your private investigator license? I had somebody go do that. Take the classes, volunteer in the places in the industries where you want to be, and just find things that are sustaining and nurturing. I know it's hard to live without an income. You know, I've been through that period in my life where I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I did some consulting. I just found anything. You know, no job was too small. I worked in a gym at night part-time. I did anything I could to find money, even though it had nothing to do with my profession. I just did what I needed to do to survive. And I know a lot of whistleblowers are driving for Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, you know, they're doing all those kinds of jobs. They're looking at self-employment options and trying to find things that make them feel good about themselves so that they can survive. But I think you have to, in some ways, mentally separate from, I only have my worth and my value based on my paycheck, and find those other things. You know, if you like to watch rocks, play yoga, or play golf, go to yoga. I mean, I think those are all still important things. Have our faith, use our faith-based communities. Those are all strong assets that we should capitalize on. I remember when all this was first happening, I used to make myself lists. Things to do instead. And I'd think about who was on my list, that who was the person I can call at 2 o'clock in the morning when I just couldn't take it anymore. And what were some of the things I could do and places I can go. things to go for a walk in the park, there were take a bubble bath. There were all these things on my list that were my visual reminders that there were other things besides this.
Excellent. My sister Vicky told me when I was an FBI agent, she said, I hope nothing ever happens to your job with the FBI because you have become that identity. And of course, that warning turned out to be true, which taught me I will never again invest in a job that it becomes your identity, because when you lose it, you lose yourself. So, yeah. Sarah, somebody asked, doctors differ on recommending anti-malarials. They all have side effects. Which one did you believe should be used?
Yeah, I did see that question in the chat as well. So there are four anti-malarial medications. And one, I should preface, I'm not a doctor. I'm not, an anti-malarial medication specialist in any way, shape, or form. I've certainly talked to quite a few experts about this, but so ultimately there are four anti-malarial medications. And Peace Corps at the time that I served was using mefloquine, which is also known as Lariam. That's the official brand name for the drug. Peace Corps was using this drug as drug of first choice. Not only were they using it as drug of first choice, but they were distributing the drug to volunteers that were not compliant with CDC guidelines. So CDC guidelines say that this drug should be started in the States for, to monitor for side effects, as well as to ensure that you need to build up you need to build up the drug in your system so that it takes about 8 weeks or so for mefloquine to become effective defender against malaria. And so Peace Corps actually waits until you're overseas to distribute the drug. And my lawsuit, I feel, illustrates the fact that they do that purposely to evade legal liability, because I had sued Peace Corps because they were using they were using mefloquine is not compliant with, or not in accordance with CDC guidelines. And so, and they were doing it purposely. And it's really as I mentioned, the most toxic, least effective anti-malarial medication. The two other medications that I've heard were better were Malarone. And Malarone at the time that I served was about $100 a pill. Mefloquine was $1 a pill. There's another drug, doxycycline, and that's also used by Peace Corps. But it's certainly, if you're serving overseas in a malarial prevalent country, I would talk to your medical care specialist, and I would ensure that that they're distributing the drug in accordance with CDC guidelines. Excellent,
Sarah. And Sherron, we have a question on what was the end game for Enron perpetrators, particularly Mr. Skellings.
Well, in game, they were manipulating financial statements during downtimes in hopes that some, new idea was going to take off and they could cover their tracks. I guess that was their plan. But the Department of Justice did form a special Enron task force with DOJ lawyers, FBI agents, SEC enforcement folks from all over the country. And Enron, there are over 24 Enron executives that are felons. And let's see, I think 14 served prison time, with Jeff Skilling serving the longest, 14 years in a federal prison. So the Department of, probably that remains the most successful white collar corporate prosecution in the DOJ's history.
Sherron, you must sleep well at night.
Well, it's been a long time ago, 20 years.
I know, but geez, that's very impressive. I know Fred and I certainly wanted to see some subjects go to jail. Of course, nobody from the FBI ever has. But we also have another question. Can one apply for disability for the trauma and PTSD, etc., while they're waiting for their case to be heard so they have an income? Does anybody know the answer?
No, I think that is a great question. So yes, Social Security disability benefits do cover emotional abuse and trauma. You just need to have a therapist that's supporting you. And the same for the military. We think of combat trauma and PTSD, but if you've been in the military, you're a veteran, if you made your disclosures on active duty, the VA has what they call personal trauma. And I would use some of the same standards for personal trauma from the VA for SSDI or workman's compensation. And I mean, that is a big part of my push, is trying to get this mental health parity for whistleblowers. Mental health parity is not great in so many areas, but if we could get that recognition that a hostile work environment causes people to have PTSD, depression, suicidal ideation, it can be related to substance abuse and other mental conditions or physiological conditions. I think we should be able to do a better job of getting damages for those conditions from the courts, as well as from the agencies that are there to help compensate for this.
Well, I'll tell you, we're closing out on our time, but we are starting this new initiative, and I hope to have all of you involved in it because it's going to be quite exciting. So you'll be hearing from me about that. You all are giants. And when you talk about 1777 and 1778, 100 years from now, people are going to be talking about you guys. I believe that. They're going to be talking about how you changed the whistleblowing world. So I thank you so much. You are inspiring. You're just special human beings. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And so thank you for your time. I'll be in touch.
Jane.
You
I
bet.
look forward to
Thank
getting
you.
the badge.
You'll get one.
Thank you.
I want one too.
Yes, we'll get it to you.
Thank you all so much. I'm so happy we got to share your stories with our audience. As you all may know or have picked up on, these whistleblowers just have a special place in my heart. And Jane Turner, as always, a fantastic moderator with wonderful questions. And we'll see you when we do whistleblower naming at 4:30. Thank you, Jane.